Hello, everybody. This is Gloria Woods, and I'd like to welcome you to our YouTube podcast tonight. This is our first one, so I'd like to say hello to everybody. I hope everybody's having an awesome day today. So this is our first session. This is our first session, and this is called Conversations with Glow. And I'm going to be coming at you either every week or every other week or every week. We hope we're gonna be able to do it every week. And so this is our first one. Just a little bit about me. I'm a mother, a grandmother. I am a social worker, and I am also a criminal justice reform person. I'm a radio talk show host, and I just love people. Love to be a blessing to people. Love to share some of my wisdom and my knowledge with people. Out of the many years that I just celebrated my 65th birthday. And so I just like to share some information. And so this particular podcast, YouTube, however you want to call it, is actually designed, amen, for us to talk about tough issues, tough subjects, conversate. Say, I'm hoping to get some people to come in on these shows, and we just sit down and talk and chat. And so we're going to be talking about tough issues, things that I say that are taboo, which means a lot of times people don't like to talk about it. We hide them under the rug, so to speak. But we're going to conversate and talk about them. Because I believe communication, open communication, makes people become healed and to become whole. And my whole ministry basically is about healing and wholeness. And so tonight we're going to be talking about a subject that I know it can be very, very touchy. Like I said, we don't like to talk about it. But it happened to me, and I'm sure it happens to many, many people. And that is the subject of molestation. And so one of the people that rings into my mind before I talk about myself when it comes to molestation and being touched inappropriately is one of my all-time favorite teachers, and that is in the person of Joyce Myers. That's Joyce Myers. And so we all know Joyce Myers is an awesome speaker, teacher, minister of the gospel. But Joyce Myers went through a lot in her life. She went through years of molestation of her father, and oftentimes her mom sat there and watched it. But she has an awesome testimony because at the end of the day, she was able to forgive her dad and actually took care of him when he was sick. So that says a lot to her as a person. And so many, many children grow up a product of molestation. I found out a lot of times children do, youth and young women, and sometimes young men, they get caught up in drug circles and drug abuse and gangs, and they go to prison, become incarcerated. Some people have homosexual lifestyles, which is okay, if that's what they choose. But sometimes it's not just because they chose it, but it's because they were touched inappropriately. Some women, especially on the woman side, I think, become a word called promiscuous, and where they like multiple relationships, and it's a product of the molestation that they have occurred. So I believe that molestation causes other adult problems in relationships. So this is going to be I think a 3-part series tonight. Tonight, I just kind of want to go over a few facts about molestation, and hopefully we can gain some knowledge and a good background so that next week we can delve into all the aspects of what happens when a person becomes molested. So molestation, I have the definition right here. It says molestation is the sexual assault or abuse of a person, especially a child. The so it can be physical. Most times it's molestation is when a child gets touched inappropriately. It could be a touch. It could be pornography, which we know is rampant in our society. It could be child asked to sit on. I know when I was growing up, how it happened with me and my sister is through child's play. My not my biological, but my uncle, who was my adopted father, started running us around the house. We noticed he would start looking in the window only the times when we were naked and were taking our baths. And so a lot of times it starts, what somebody may say innocently. Sometimes the men, and sometimes it happens with women too, they want you to sit on their lap. They want to touch you in places that you should not be touched at. And thus, that begins the start of some molestation and some inappropriate touching. And some, in the worst scenarios, it happens when children get penetrated. And so why am I talking about this? So why is this such a subject? Because number one, as I was growing up as a child, my mom and my family had this saying that what goes on in the house stays in the house. And so for many, many years, we tried to tell people, that these things were happening. And of course, because my biological father, whom I didn't know, had mental health disorders and mental health problems, they would say we were crazy. We didn't know what we were talking about. We were lying, and it was untrue, just lying on the da-da-da-da-da. And so, in that, oftentimes, I don't know how it is today's society, but in that realm, I'm a what they call a baby boomer. Amen. Born in the 1960s, and my sister was born in 1959, and I was born in 1960. So so it's kind of like here we are, here we are, trying to cry out for help. And as we were crying out for help, we were told we were lying and that we had some kind of mental disorder. And so that's a common factor of that day and age, that children go for years and years and years. I know some cases where children have gone for probably 13 or 14 years, you know, 13 to 14 years, and they spent years and years and years being touched inappropriately, being molested, being penetrated, and it just brings all other kind of problems. I feel one of the main problems that molestation can cause with children is trauma. And let's look at what trauma means. And this is just tonight. We're going to get into some scenarios and some case studies. But tonight is just an informational time so that we can have a background of all of this. It's talk. It's not preaching. I can preach. I know how to preach. I'm an evangelist. But we just need to sit down and talk about these issues so that we can help our young people in these areas of relationships. So a lot of people deal with trauma, and trauma can come in a lot of different ways. Let's look at what is trauma. What do we think trauma is? Well, to me, trauma has to do with, it says, according to the American Psychological Association, trauma is an emotional response. However, a person may experience trauma as a response to any event that they find physically or emotionally threatening or harmful. So people can go through molestation, areas of molestation, and could be totally traumatized by it. And trauma leads to other stuff, at least to emotional problems. Some people get so traumatized by the idea that they've been touched all these years inappropriately that they feel like they have to do drugs. They feel like that. Some people feel like they have to go out there and rob banks. Some people feel like they're just gonna have all kinds of relationships. My sister, who she died a few years ago, her the molestation, the way I responded to molestation and the way she just responded to molestation was two different things. My sister was very promiscuous, and my sister had, because she was a beautiful woman. I mean, very well built, beautiful woman. Always got into relationships. And multiple relationships. Amen. And so that's how she dealt with it. I dealt with it. Well, I became very withdrawn and very quiet and timid. I don't want to talk. And that's another sign of molestation. When a child becomes timid and doesn't want to talk and doesn't want to socialize, become antisocial. I mean, they can become, that can be a sign of a child who has been molested. Now, this is the issue with molestation. Most times, and I think that we fail to realize this, most times molestation, not all times, but a lot of times, the perpetrator is somebody that's familiar to the child. It's usually a family, friend, sometimes it's a church, somebody from church. And so the child doesn't actually know that they should not allow that person to touch them inappropriately. Now, I think we are educating our kids a little bit better today, although it still happens. It still happens. But I think it's not as taboo or as hidden under the rug like it used to be at one point. And so I want us to get a working idea on this subject. And why are we talking about this? I want to save some of our children from the adult issues that they have. I go to prisons and I go to, I talk with people frequently, and the majority of the people that have some of the issues that they have, as far as incarceration, drug addiction, and suicide attempts, comes from the fact that they have been molested in some kind of way. And so I felt that this would be our very first conversation, very, very important, because the other things that we're going to build on are going to be other issues that we don't like to talk about, like homelessness, like drug addiction, all kinds of other stuff that we're going to talk about. But I believe that as a child, me personally, I believe some of the relationship problems, not just with men, but relationship problems I had in church settings. I mean, I can remember being in church, and I served pretty open. I pretty was kind of like serving around leadership. But when people got in a group, I withdrew to myself. I didn't really socialize. I didn't really talk. And I believe part of that had to do with the molestation that occurred in my life. I believe I went through some traumatic experiences as far as getting into a bad marriage, amen. I mean, being homeless, amen, and having the suicidal attempts that I had because of the molestation that went unaddressed. I had trust issues because I was like, okay, this must be my mom. She should be protecting me and my sister, and she allowed it to happen and actually covered up many days. Many days she would cover up, saying that it never happened, that we were lying, that we're crazy and all this stuff like that. And so it's very, very important, I believe, for me as a advocate for people, is that we address these issues, that we come into some kind of understanding of what molestation really is. And it could just be touching somebody inappropriately. See, we think that molestation has to do with penetration, sexual in a sexual manner, but it could be touching somebody in the wrong place. For me, the molestation with my stepfather, he would watch us he wouldn't watch us at any other time, but he would be looking through that window while we were naked and had no clothes on. That was the beginning stages of molestation. Then, as time went by, he would lay on the couch with no clothes on, with his genitals showing. And in a couple of situations, he actually penetrated my sister. So one thing led to another. We both had all kinds of issues in our life. We both got married so we can get out the house. We couldn't leave the house, so we got married, and we both got divorced. So those are the things that to me are very, very important, very, very things that we just gotta bring out on the table. I think we have to bring it out on the table. I would love to have groups, sessions with young women, even children. Probably families don't want to talk about it. Some families might, but if we can do some groups on how can we bring these issues out so that there will be not so many children caught up in molestation? Because what generally happens, I found out recently, I was able to go out with a organization that deals with human trafficking called Offensive, and they deal with human trafficking that a lot of times molestation ends up in human trafficking of young children and of teenagers. Some of them are not even teenagers. Some of them are like 5 or 6 or 7, 8, 9, 10 years old. A child should not have to experience that. And so we're going to probably close this out. Each week, I don't plan to go past 30 minutes. We're almost at 20 minutes now. And this was just an overview to talk about what molestation is, how can we prevent it? I mean, the question becomes, how can we prevent our kids, our girl, and I'm going to say this, and I know we probably don't want to hear this right here, is that there are just as many males that are being molested by females or other males than there are girls. It's just a sad commentary. I go to prisons probably every other month. And one of the major things that the women say in those prisons is that they were molested or touched inappropriately and molested by somebody in their family. And it took them years and years and years to work through those situations. And they ended up, as a result, incarcerated because of the anger and the bitterness. See, it leads to other things too. It leads to our emotions. Our emotions get involved because when you're traumatized, it brings about anxiety. It can bring about depression and oppression. It can bring about psychosis. It can bring about bipolar disorders, all kinds of stuff. It brings about because trauma is not, we think trauma is an incident, but it's really, I heard one lady said, Dr. Tawana House from NAMI says, what trauma really is a reaction to an event that has occurred in our lives. And so when it comes to molestation, I don't think that we understand really the emotional burden and the emotional stress that it brings upon one's life when they have had to deal. And most of these babies and these children have been molested for years and years and years, and they're told to be quiet. They're told, show daddy you love him or show uncle you love him. They depict that act as an act of love, which is not an act of love. It's inappropriate, it's wrong, and it takes a child to a place that a child should never have to experience. And for many, it takes years and years and years of recovery, and for some, they never recover. So this is what we wanted to talk about tonight. I'm going to probably wrap this up tonight. I hope everybody has enjoyed this. I know it's kind of pretty thick. we might be a little light next week because we're going to talk about some scenarios. But I think that we have to bring things to the table that we normally never want to talk about. And who wants to talk about molestation until it becomes a tragedy? And my job and my assignment is to get the stuff out on the table, communicate. That's why I call this show Conversations. Let's conversate about these things so that we can get a remedy to them. So again, my name is Gloria, and this YouTube is Broken Shackles Outreach 1082. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share, and let's get some subscribers on this, and we will see you on next week.